was 18 at the time. I weighed 270. And, obviously I'm 5'6", so it was way above the weight that I needed to be at.
Yeah.
You don't get that by having good habits in life, not just in nutrition, but in life. So my whole life reflected that. I'd go to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning, wake up at 2 or 3. I worked for my dad, so maybe I'd show up for a couple hours, just no structure, right? No structure, no direction. Started having these chest pains laying down, and I didn't know anything about health at the time, so like I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it probably wasn't good.
You're young.
Oh yeah, I'm 18 at the time.
Crazy.
Laying in bed and thought, well, I need to do something, right? And I just started doing things that seemed like good ideas, right? I'd get water instead of soda. I'd eat 2 or 3 slices of pizza from Domino's rather than the pizza from Domino's. I'd get a plain baked potato rather than French fries and a Frosty. I'd get grilled chicken rather than fried, like just things that I thought, this just seems logical, right, as a place to start.
Small changes.
Yeah, and I did them for the first time, did them with real consistency, and so started to see my weight fall. And then I had some friends at the time who were into the gym and into exercising, and so, you'd always heard, well, like, that's a part of it, so implemented that and started to see more.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Mountain Tough podcast. We're so glad you're here, and we're so glad you're coming back week after week to listen to these episodes. It's our goal to bring you guys interesting, inspirational people that will help you live a more abundant life. We don't run ads on the Mountain Tough podcast. We just ask that if these episodes are inspiring to you, they are helping you, please share them with others, and please leave us a review in the podcast store of your choice if you haven't done so already. Those reviews and those rankings mean a ton to us, so if you have time, please do that. Now, diving into today's episode, today I sit down with Kyle Kamp. Kyle is an inspiring dude and has a crazy inspiring story. Kyle is actually celebrating his 14th anniversary of losing 140 pounds. So his life transformation over the last decade has been insane, and his weight loss story is insane. But the man he is today is truly inspiring, the way he lives and his habits and his lifestyle. You're not going to want to miss this episode with Kyle. Kyle has gone through a career transition as well at the same time of his weight loss transition. So he dove headfirst into nutrition and did all of the school and research so that now he is a full-time nutritionist helping tons of clients around the world. He also specializes in the hunter and nutrition for the mountain athlete. So this is truly an episode you're not going to want to miss to take your nutrition to a whole new level, to help your performance on the mountain, and just make you overall a better human being. Stand by as I dive into the conversation with Kyle.
It was very much hunting and mountain, whatever.
Yeah.
And there still is that, but it's morphed into like guys that have heard me on a podcast, their wives want to get in better shape or lose weight or learn about nutrition, or people who have nothing to do with the hunting or mountain community. It's morphed into kind of this all around program, which I love. I mean, I love that. Yes, usually people have some sort of connection either in a first or second degree to hunting or outdoor, but not everybody is this like hardcore, I'm gone from August to December hunter either. And, I love that, the wide variety there.
I like that too. Yeah. Because everyone needs, just like with Mountain Tough, we have so many hunter military athletes, but we also have a lot of people that are just looking for an extreme level of functional fitness, or they're just looking for something difficult to do at home, but they don't plan to hunt, or they're not in the military, and it's still awesome to see those folks doing the program.
Yeah. I love the variety. So it ranges from truly moms to consult with some programs out of Australia that do mountaineering trips too. So like people going to Everest or Kilimanjaro or some bigger mountain, probably what in most people's mind would be, quote, more extreme type of things. But the variety is fun for me.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy all aspects of it, and it's really had to make me like, people will ask, like, what's the biggest thing that's changed in the world of nutrition in your mind over the years that you've done this? I'll say not a lot. Like science is, for the most part, from a foundational sense, about the same. What has changed for me is the need to learn how to work with everyone and to get an idea of where someone is, where they want to be, and develop something that works for them. Versus, hey, here's nutrition, go do it. Well, this doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, this is the way it works. Go do it. You really have to adjust and tailor the plan for the person.
Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on what they want, where they're at. And it's been a humbling learning experience, right? Because you get out of college and you think like, all right, I'm going to change the world. I know all about nutrition. It's like, you can have all the head knowledge in the face of the planet, but if you can't work with people, it will be pointless.
That's what it's all
absolutely
about.
Pointless, yeah.
The mindset and being able to communicate with them.
Yeah, 100%. No one can speak to that better than you guys.
So the journey that you've been on related to nutrition, a lot of it started with your own story, correct? Your own weight loss story. Before kind of that pivotal moment, you were not into nutrition. You didn't go to college for nutrition until after that moment. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm probably the least likely candidate to be sitting in this seat. If you had met me, call it 15, 17 years ago. So yeah, I grew up in the Midwest and did not have parents who were like into nutrition at all. Did not have parents who were into the mountains, did not hunt as a kid, did not have parents who were into fitness who like exposed me to this great lifestyle that I just then, carried out. I was 18 at the time. I weighed 270 and, obviously I'm 5'6", so I was way above the weight that I needed to be at.
Yeah.
You don't get that by having good habits in life, not just in nutrition, but in life. So my whole life reflected that in the sense of like, I'd go to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning, wake up at 2 or 3. I worked for my dad, so maybe I'd show up for a couple hours. Just everything about my life screamed very no structure, right? No structure, no direction. And then it was Christmas morning. I was 18 years old. Laying in bed after we had opened gifts as a family, weighed 270 at the time, and started having these chest pains laying down. And I didn't know anything about health at the time, so like I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it probably wasn't good. And I'd had some preemptive health screenings from the place that I had worked that would say stuff like, "Oh, your blood pressure is getting higher. Here's some markers. You should pay attention to that." And
you're young.
Oh yeah, I'm 18 at the time.
Crazy.
Blew it, kind of blew those suggestions off, and laying in bed and thought, well, I need to do something, right? And didn't do anything that Christmas dinner. I still went full send, but the next week, like I just started doing things that seemed like good ideas, right? I'd get water instead of soda. I'd eat 2 or 3 slices of pizza from Domino's rather than the pizza from Domino's. I'd get a plain baked potato rather than French fries and a Frosty. I'd get grilled chicken rather than fried, like just things that I thought, this just seems logical, right, as a place to start.
Small changes.
Yeah, and I did them for the first time, did them with real consistency, and so started to see my weight fall. And then I had some friends at the time who were into the gym and into exercising. And so, you'd always heard, well, like that's a part of it. So implemented that and started to see more. And the way that my brain is wired is very much like, okay, well, all of these things make sense, but I really want to know what's happening. Why are these things, so good for me? And so started to dive off into doing some research on my own with nutrition and like, well, if I've taken the good, better, best, and I'm at good, what does better look like? And so started really even changing what I eat on a day-to-day basis, continued to see results. And so at this point, I'd been dating a girl for quite a while who had graduated a nursing program in our town. And at this point, my dad had seen the writing on the wall and he was like, you have no direction. So he sent me on task to go watch physical labor jobs. So he was the head of our transportation department in our city. He said, I want you to go in the field and I want you to watch these guys do this work.
Just observe.
Because that's probably the type of career you're going to have. And if you like that type of work, great. If you don't, you've got to figure out something with your life. I did not want to work that hard. I mean, truly, like, hats off to the people who do physical labor and vocational jobs. Like, I mean, everything from plumbing to trimming trees to all of that, like physical labor. Honestly, maybe this isn't good for the mental tough piece, but I was like, I'm not that mentally tough, at least not then.
At that age,
yeah. So I thought, well, okay, the only other option, school. What do I want to go back for? And I had two options. I really wanted to pursue, and at this point, I lost a fair amount of the weight. So went from 270 down to 130 at my lowest. So 140-pound weight loss. And I'll come back to that in a minute.
Over what time frame?
That's the part I was going to come back to. So I'll come back to it.
Okay.
So I went to looking at the courses available in my town. Is either going to be physical education, but I really wanted to pursue nutrition. So I met with a guidance counselor. And I will say that process in losing weight really helped me develop some focus for my life. And I started getting up earlier. I started to develop some structure, some routine, and some consistency. And so I had built that by the time I had met with this guidance counselor, and she said, look, your study habits, your history says you suck at studying. You have no background in science, no background in math. And in fact, you're going to need probably quite a few remedial classes before you even start taking classes that count towards your major. I thought, well, I'll do it. You know, like, let me sign up, let me try. If I fail, I don't want to be doing this forever. So at least I'll try. And if I fail, I'll find something else. Mm-hmm. So like for a long time, that was my life. I mean, I basically axed everything because I had to invest a lot of time really understanding the material as opposed to relying on, past smarts because I didn't have them. The time period that it took me to lose 140 pounds was 8 months.
Wow.
Which if someone hears that and is like, that's insane.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm in the unique boat in the sense of like, I've experienced every spectrum in the sense of being extremely overweight, having that process, and then the pendulum swung to the other end where I was eating so few calories that like I started to see the complexities that can come from eating too few calories too long, losing hair, sleeping in my car because I couldn't walk inside, like just no energy whatsoever. I remember it being in the middle of July, southern Indiana, which is where I grew up. And, the temperature outside's crazy hot, humidity's crazy high. And I'm in my car cold with the windows up, no air on. And because I had nothing in me, right?
No calories. And you're like 19 or 20 years old.
At that time, yeah. And I thought, this is killing you. And as bad as you wanted to lose that weight, this is not a life either. And so then I had no knowledge of diet. Recovery diets weren't a thing then. There was no information on the internet. Thank God. I probably, who knows what I would have tried. So I started eating more, right? I started to increase my calorie intake more to where I intentionally put on 15 pounds. And that's where I've been ever since. So yeah, there's again, like I am the least likely candidate to be sitting here because I've just been all over the map in terms of having no life, no structure, no background, no education, nothing like that in it, to having had experienced the opposite end of the spectrum where you just go full send into it in a negative way. Yeah. And you have to, find that balance again. So
yeah, from 140 pounds overweight to starvation.
Yeah.
Has just like formed your whole perspective.
And it gives you and this is very cliche, especially on a podcast, but it gives you an appreciation for it because I know what that felt like, you know what I mean? And so when you're working with people and they're describing some of these issues, it's not a hypothetical suggestion of, well, I think you need to eat a little bit more. I can confidently say like, you need to eat more. That's exactly what's going on with you, you know? And so in some sense, it was a hidden blessing to have been on every end of the spectrum, to have experienced what it feels like to lose that. Like I did a podcast recently actually on sobriety and habits and behavior change. And not that I'd ever struggled with alcohol in the sense of having to fight that, but she described it as the river of misery. And I loved that because it paints this imagery that says, okay, I mean, hunters are familiar with rivers, right?
Yep.
You're on one side, you see this river, it's waist deep, it's November, you're cold, you're going to have to walk through this to get to where you want to go. And that's true. There's no free lunch. Like, you're going to have to wade it. And having had waded that river of misery, like, there are hard times. Like, there is no, when you think about nutrition, we think about training, like, sometimes people enter a program or whatever, and the idea is, I'm going to change my life and not really have to, there's not going to be any consequence to it, in the sense of, I'm not going to notice anything different. My life is going to go on as normal. That is not true. I mean, you will have to, there will be moments that are hard. You have to wade through the river of misery, but just like a river, like, the bank gets more and more shallow and the water goes down from your waist to your thighs, to your knees, to your ankles, and then you're over it.
You're across
It gets easier the longer you're in it. And the more you expose yourself to those hard things, the easier it is to wade the river. You're like, well, like anyone who has been hunting or in the backcountry or whatever and sees a river for the first time, terrified. But the more you walk through that, the more you go through rivers, the less and less concern you get. You're like, well, I'm not like looking forward to this necessarily, but it's not that big of a deal. Let's cross it and let's get through it.
Everyone's easier. Yeah.
Everyone gets easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you put in that work the first time and kind of overcome some of those fears as well.
Yeah. 100%.
So that was around 15 years ago, 14 years ago. And a lot has changed since then. And you've been diving into nutrition full time as a career. Over those 15 years now compared to then, like, what is your process 101 now for clients that are calling you or reaching out to you?
That's a good question. A lot of that has evolved over the years, and I think been built out of, like, I don't want to necessarily call it social media, but let's say accessibility to information. We were recording the new nutrition program that we did for the MTNTOUGH app yesterday, and said to Nate, I was like, the best thing about the day and age that we live in is that you can have access to any information you want at any time. The worst thing about the day and age that you live in is that you can have access to information anywhere at any time. And so you have sometimes good meaning people writing articles about what's worked for them in the world of nutrition and training and all of these things. And it's almost always bathed in complexities and nuances, and it really confuses people. I mean, that is the general theme at the end of the day when I talk to people is, I'm so confused.
Too much info.
I'm more than willing to invest the work. I recognize there's a river of misery I'm going to have to wade through. I'm fine with that at this point in my life. I've tried the easy routes. None of them have worked. I understand there's going to be a process here, but I don't know what to do. I have no idea how to even get started. And so for me, I've tried to, and I feel like we have moved away from this idea that the topic's confusing and there's complexities that you need to follow and there's nuances and blood work and blah, and just try to simplify it and create as much clarity as possible and say, look, there's a couple of basics and they're non-negotiables based on what you want. Outside those couple of basics, you've got complete preference and freedom of control. And when you give people that autonomy, there's like a switch that switches in their head. It's like, oh, you mean like I'm not going to have my feet held to the fire and get rid of stuff I like or commit to a life of foods I absolutely hate? And be like, no, you don't. And here's, why you walk them through that process. They're a lot more open to walk through that over however long it takes.
They get that clarity.
Yeah.
And so what, in your process now, what are your non-negotiables?
So the non-negotiables, and this is exactly what the program's built around that we put in the app, is number one, you have to, and this really isn't the non-negotiable, although I guess it is. You have to identify what the goal is. What do you want out of what you're willing to go follow, right? Like if you, the analogy that we used was, if you go to the archery range, or, you know, in Boise, we go to the desert to try to sight in our rifles, and you're just flinging arrows and bullets downrange with no real idea of where they're going. And then you say, well, yeah, we're ready to roll because something came out that's not doing it. You got to have an idea of what you're trying to hit to build the plan, right? And so the first thing is you have to develop some sort of a goal. And for most people, that goal is going to be built around three things. This is the most common things that we hear. Either they're entering, like hunting season's the prime example, and they just simply want to maintain what they've worked for during the building phase of their off season. Or it's the off season and they're wanting to build muscle or build endurance, or they're wanting to lose body fat. And almost always when people reach out, they say, I want to do all three at one time.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, but the nutrition plan for the three are vastly different. It would literally be like hooking a tow truck up to a tow truck and telling them to drive in opposing directions. You would just end up with no progress being gained. So the first thing is getting an idea of what your plan is going to be.
What's most important?
What's most important in that time frame. So like people who are familiar with the podcast or familiar with Mountain Tough, you're phasing things. You're looking at things in blocks of training, a focused session, and then you move to the next one, and then you move to the next one. You're running things in order, not trying to kill 500 things in one training session or even one plan. Once you identify the goal, then you can build the non-negotiables of the plan. And so the non-negotiables are first and foremost calorie intake, because so let's take the idea of a person says, look, my main interest right now is to build muscle. Well, to build muscle, the body period, before we're even talking about building muscle, has a requisite amount of calories it needs simply to allow you and I to talk, for our hearts to beat, and for our guts to digest food, and for our brains to work, and our lungs to work. There is a baseline calorie need for that, even if you laid in bed all day. To put your body in a state to build muscle, you have to be above that. So you have to be at, let's call it a mild surplus to put yourself in that position. Well, if you're getting tons of protein to build muscle, but your body's not in that state of being able to build because you're not getting enough calories, you could have all the protein on the planet. You're not going to build any muscle because you're not in that state.
It's going to be wasted.
It's going to be wasted. And so on the flip side of that, the same would be true of body fat. If you're not below that requisite need, you could eliminate every carb in the diet and still just be hovering where you are because there's no deficit. Calories are the foundation, and there's a gigantic, call it a push around, well, calories don't matter. Yes, they do. At the end of the day, thermodynamics does not change. That is the premise of your plan. Second to that, and there's more open-ended to this, would be where those calories are coming from, your macronutrients, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats. While those aren't going to determine the state that you're in terms of losing weight or building mass, they can control how stable are your energy levels throughout the course of the day. Do you have enough gas in the tank to get through a training workout? Is there enough protein there to recover? And so there is some importance, even though it's not the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's an important piece to remember too, is because a lot of times people want perfection and, what's my perfect macro percentage? People are, under the assumption sometimes of, there's this perfect percentage or ratio you should hit, and there's not. And I'll say this too, you may sense a chip on my shoulder about the whole topic. It is not because of folks trying to follow a plan. It is because in my world, when you get business coaching, when you own a nutrition program, one of the underlying ideas is keep the client confused, because then they stay on.
They keep asking for more.
Yeah, there's a point of confusion there. And I think the best thing you could give a client is eventual autonomy, because they're going to be so much more successful. The chip on my shoulder are the folks that are trying to keep people confused by saying, look, your success is tied in the nuances, because it's not. You have well-meaning people who want to accomplish goals, and they're so confused that they don't know where to start. And that bothers me a lot. And so really, those are a couple of, the major non-negotiables: calorie intake, how those calories are split up. And then the third one, and again, the way that we talked about it in the app was, you're looking at these through a pyramid, and at the bottom, the base of the pyramid, things matter the most. And as you move up, they matter less and less. And third would be like timing, meal frequency, when you eat, in other words. Just those things matter less and less the further you get up that pyramid. So
the first one's probably a game changer for a lot of folks. Just that understanding of intake versus outtake is controlling the majority of their weight loss or gain. And we see that a lot at Mountain Tough, is most people want to dive into number 2 before they understand 1. So a lot of people want to like fine tune their engine through macros, which we see as like more of a performance nutrition approach, without understanding non-negotiable number 1. If they just don't understand the basics of intake versus outtake, once they wrap their mind around that concept, just that like peace and clarity that is like, wow, if I consume 2,800 calories a day and burn 2,800 calories a day, I'm going to maintain this weight that I'm happy with, or I need to create that deficit a little bit to drop some pounds. Like, that very simple approach can be quite profound for some people, because then they don't have to get into the specific shopping for specific healthier foods. It's just basic math.
Well, and I think it again, giving people autonomy and not trying to be super rigid in the sense of like, think about it, trying to wake up to go do a training program, and trying to do figure out how many calories are actually coming in. It can be challenging enough when you've got a job and you've got kids and you're trying to maintain a marriage or a relationship and friendships. And so then if you start saying, well, like, oh, by the way, you've got to play this nutrition Sudoku puzzle of getting this many grams of this and that many grams of that, it becomes exhausting. And more importantly, it doesn't matter. That is not what's going to move the needle. And I think like, this is I guess a side note on the macros. I think many people are under the assumption that the macros are what's going to drive your ability to do physical things and your composition. And that's not true. Your training is what's going to develop your ability to do something physical in the mountains, right? What nutrition does is it gives you the energy to go execute that training. It gives you the protein that you need to recover from that training, so you can, in a sequential order, hit the next program, right? Like, one of the basic principles of training is progressive overload. And so you have to be consistent, and the program has to progressively, incrementally challenge you a little bit more over time so you get better, so you don't get stagnant and stop growing. The nutrition is not doing that. It's giving you the energy you need to go execute it and to recover from it, so that when Tuesday rolls around, you're not so smoked from the workout on Monday that you have to skip it. And you're skipping workouts all the time, so there's no consistency, so you're never progressing. But nutrition alone is not enhancing your physical performance. The training regimen is. Nutrition is simply allowing you the fuel to go execute it and the recovery from it, so that you can consistently hit the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And that, if you can, like, one of the phrases that we use all the time is master the basics and do them with relentless consistency. If you can relentlessly and be consistent, showing up for your training program, it's not a matter of like, oh man, will I get better? You will get better. It's just a matter of how long. Will it be 4 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks? Depends on the goal. But if you show up and you execute the program, which the nutrition is allowing you to go do with consistency, I don't even have to worry if you'll
Yeah.
get there. I know you will.
Yeah, consistency is everything.
Absolutely.
So let's say like a 44-year-old male comes to see you personally, and they have, like 2 kids, an office job, and they're looking to drop 40 to 50 pounds. And so they hire you as their personal nutrition coach. What does that first month look like with that client?
That's a great question. You asking for a friend? Just kidding. That's a good question. So I think number one, sitting down with them and getting an idea of what the goal is based on those 3 things. Maybe it's an outlier too. Like, that's one arm of the population we work with. And the second arm is like, hey, I've got a 10-day sheep hunt coming up in Alaska. Last time the guide smoked me. I couldn't keep up. I had to stay in camp day 6, 7, 8, and 9 because I couldn't recover. I'd like to do it different. What should I do on the mountain? That's a totally separate arm. But let's say that they're doing some sort of a long-term program. Getting an idea of what the goal is, getting an idea of where they're at. What are your current habits? Because number one, some of those should carry forward into your new plan, whatever that looks like. Like, we are not going to tell you Friday night pizza night with your kids are out. Cancel it. Kiss it goodbye. You need to buy salad while they eat pizza and you watch Mulan. That's not the case. You should still eat pizza with your kids. So there are parts of your current life that you deem as bad habits that we want to be a part of your next life or your next plan or your whatever. So getting an idea of what that looks like. The next step is by and large the most unpopular. That is, I would strongly encourage people to spend some time tracking your food, right? Because you have no idea where those gaps are. And I think the most important, if anybody has not turned this off yet after me saying that, because it is tedious, right? It's meticulous. There's a level of focus and intensity and frankly, just annoyingness that comes with that and detail that people don't like. The idea of tracking is not that you're committing to that for the rest of your life. It's to give you an idea of where you are. What trends do you see? And almost always, if you track and you give the person the opportunity to look at that, they will be like me. Oh, maybe I should do grilled chicken instead of fried 5 days a week.
Because the data shows you black and white where you're at.
Oh, yeah. Like the phrase that we use is what gets measured gets managed. And there is nothing like a tracker to expose where habits are. And honestly, like when we onboard people, we have them do an audit like that. You can do it in a general sense and write it out. You can do it in a specific sense and track it in an app. But what I care more about, they think I want very meticulous records. I'm looking more for trends. If you go out to eat, what do you like to order? How often do you drink sodas during the week? How often are you likely to grab fun-size Snickers in October because they're on the boss's desk? Did that actually equal 4 king size? In reality, like you've just been putting back 6, 7, 8, and 9 minis thinking, oh, it's not that bad. The accumulation of the habits is almost always what catches people. They're the gotchas, right? And you can't know what to change if you get stuck. You can't know what to change if you're making some sort of an attempt, but you're not getting there. My argument would be the suffering and the misery involved with trying but seeing no progress is way worse than the quote suffering and misery of actually just tracking your food.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea again is, and this is again one of the things we went over in the app. Eventually you're not going to rely on those. But if there's a specific goal that you want to use, there is no greater teacher than using an app, than tracking your food. It will teach you a lot about nutrition.
So are you, with most clients, are you at least getting them to track a week or 2 so that they can see that?
At least, yeah. And usually I want a weekday and weekends.
Yeah.
And because oftentimes you'll hear someone say, like, I don't understand why I'm not meeting the goals I've set for myself. I eat, quote, clean, which is another topic altogether. I eat clean during the week, but I don't see why, I'm not meeting the progress. And you get them to do an audit. And so, yes, their habits, their diet, whatever you want to call it, looks great Monday through Friday. Saturday and Sunday come and it's full send, right?
Binging the weekends.
Yeah, it's like whole slab of ribs off the Traeger with the family, just all sorts of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with ribs. There's nothing wrong with the Traeger. There's nothing wrong with barbecue sauce. There's nothing wrong with a family gathering. There's nothing good. There's nothing bad. It's always the dose, right, that makes the poison. So you'll get people who feel super dialed as a whole, never realizing, believe it or not, those 2 days of unbartered intake are undoing everything you do during the week, because it's a summation of net habits, right? So you've got to think, yes, it's just 2 days a week. That's 8 days a month. I mean, that's almost 30% of your intake. And going back to the foundations of calories, if the surplus is high from those 8 days to the point of where it simply allows you to stay at your current weight when you've got the goal of losing body fat, it won't move.
Still a surplus.
It just won't move, even if you're in a deficit for 5 days. I mean, you're looking. It is about daily habit change, but the reality is that it's the accumulation of the daily habits on 30 days, 60 days, 6 months that moves the needle. And the inverse of that, it's not Christmas dinner, being the guy that brings the quote healthy potato casserole. It's like, eat the normal one.
Yeah.
1 day is a fraction of your whole year. Right. And that's somewhat the irony is it's like on holidays, this is a complete side tangent, but holidays, we quote, try to be good. And it's like, well, what about the other 355 days a year? That's what's gone wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So with this, like a hypothetical scenario, the client starts tracking, they start to see in the data some obvious issues. So they might see that they never knew how many calories they were consuming each day. They thought they were doing okay, but maybe they were consuming way too many calories, or potentially they were doing okay, but getting way overboard on the weekends. I assume just by seeing that data on paper, there is the aha moments where they're like, oh, yeah, I'm way over, or I really need to cut that back a little bit. Do they struggle with implementing those changes right away?
That's an excellent question. You can, you meaning me, I can go two different directions here. And again, trying to give the person the feeling of autonomy as much as possible, where they have choice. There's not like, this is the way, go do it. You don't want to? Sorry about you. I guess you don't want it bad enough. That's the other type of crap that's like pervading the nutrition community. It's not true. There's so much preference in this that people can adapt and modify to themselves. I would say, okay, let's say that you're a very engineer-minded person. You're a very data guy. You're an objective guy. You're a spreadsheet guy. You love that. You love all of that. Mm-hmm. And we find out that through 7-day, 10-day average, that looks like your normal intake, that you're eating 3,500 calories. I'm not going to say, hey, looks like you need to be at 17. Let's go there. Embrace the suck, because it's going to be there. If it's at 35, I'm going to say, let's bring it down to 32. Let's bring it down to 3, because in reality, you're wanting to create a small deficit, not a gigantic one. And so the value of the tracker is there is no ambiguity about it. That is the data, right? I can tell you with precision, go to this number, you go to the number, the progress comes. That's the nice thing about being more specific. Like, I'll use myself as an example. When I weighed 270, consuming on average between 3,500 and 4,000 calories a day, when I first started seeing initial weight loss, I may have been at 28 to 3,000. I wasn't at 17 or 18 or something crazy. Look, yeah, I'm trying to create moderate deficits. And that's important because you're controlling hunger, right? When you ask someone to go into a deficit, it will stimulate some hunger. But there's a dramatic difference between I am absolutely freaking miserable and, yeah, I'm ready for dinner. Like, I could definitely go for dinner now. There's a dramatic difference between those two things. And so you want there to be enough of a deficit to stimulate the goal, body fat movement loss. You want there to be enough of a deficit there to move the weight, but you don't want it to be so aggressive that adherence drops. And that's what you see. If you try to initiate this giant deficit, sure, they can grip the rails for 3, 4, 5 days, but day 6 and 7, they're full send because they're so hungry. And that's what we would call like a drop in adherence. Frankly, because somebody didn't know how to write the program, not the fault of the person. And that's the other piece is like you get someone in that situation, and the idea of the person is this this guilt of like, I'm not mentally strong enough. I'm not the guy that can, do the thing that I needed to do or whatever, right? And it's like, no, the program that was written for you sucked. That's not your fault. The expectation was unrealistic. So let's go fix that versus trying to say you're the guy that doesn't have what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
On a more general sense, you got the guy who's into subjective stuff, right? And not into the spreadsheets and into the nuances. You can have them then look at that and say, what are some swaps we could make? Rather than drinking 2 beers every night, have 1 every other night. Rather than eating 6 fun-size Snickers, have 1 every day after lunch. Rather than, like find these small tweaks like I described I did when I first started losing weight to help them, to help move that, right? And they all of a sudden feel, again, like, God, that's easy. I can do that.
Swap.
Yeah. I'll never forget, before I started doing this program, I worked in a clinic for a while, and I would have truckers come in a lot. And we'd go over like, well, what are you eating? First of all, you're not moving all day, but what are you eating? Let's reconcile that. They're eating out a lot. And so the expectation is that I'm going to say, okay, well, you need to start spending the week before you're on the road trip prepping. Yeah, prep everything, buy yourself a mini fridge, do all these things. And instead, what I would have them do is I'd say, just order half. Don't change what you order, just order half. And see if it doesn't move. And so part of our program was you'd build them a plan. They'd go do it for 3-4 weeks. They'd come back and they'd lose weight because they could do that. Right? It was simple. And then from their perspective, like, they like saving money, like, and I had lunch the next day. Right. And so it was simple. But the end of the day, again, if you can achieve a deficit, how you do that is a million different ways. There is no perfect. And so you do sit down with the person and you say, well, look, here's the buffet of options. What do you feel like's going to be the best for you? Let's take your same guy though. And he comes up with option B, more general. He's just changing a couple of things. He wants to take 40 to 50 pounds off. He gets 20 off, gets stuck. Well, now what? Well, this all looks pretty good. So I don't necessarily see anything in here other than me giving you unhelpful advice to just eat less that you could change. You might track then, right? Because you are getting the amount of calories in that you need to maintain that 20-pound weight loss. And if you're happy with that, congratulations, way to go. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
But if you're not, you want more. The body is basically adjusted to that lower intake, doing the simple method. And aside from me saying, now there could be a lot of other things in there where he's like, I could work on that, I could work on that, I could work on that. But let's say we've tapped all of those resources. At that point, you either have to be good with how far you've come, or you have to be willing to say, all right, there's a little more detail here.
For a little more of a deficit.
So you need to figure out a way like, all right, I've done everything I can here. I'm not quite where I want to be. What do I need to do to achieve that extra 10, 15, 20, whatever pounds?
And that same guy at that point could increase their outtake by their physical fitness as well.
Yep. And that's what, like, let's say he's already engaged in a training program. So he's that door is opened. The nutrition door is opened. We've tapped most of our resources. Something as simple as steps, like if you track your steps, very basic, right? You go back and you look and it says, okay, on average, you're an office guy, you take 1,800 steps per day. You don't have more time to go do another workout plus 2 days, unless you're an athlete, like getting paid to be an athlete, probably out of the question.
Yeah.
You've tapped every resource you feel like tapping with nutrition. What about walking with your family, right? Just create this idea of every day after dinner, we're going to go walking. So now your step count goes from 1,800 to 5,800. That's 5,000 or 4,000 more steps per day than you were previously getting. That doesn't sound like much. That's not going to be something you post on a reel about your aggressive workout and how you sweated it out, but it's an increase in expenditure, and you'll get the weight to continue to move.
That's so simple. Yeah. So simple and easy. So shifting gears now, just for a perspective on kind of a different angle. So you have a performance athlete call you. Let's say it's like the same 44-year-old working professional, a couple kids at home. They are working out a couple times a day. They're like an active mountain hunter that is kind of pushing their limits on sheep hunts, and they want to fine tune their nutrition for high performance. So really high performance in the gym and on the mountain, and also like managing some of their macros so that they're not losing muscle. Is it a different approach for that person, or how do you handle that one?
Yeah, because usually that person's not going to be as concerned with calories. If they're eating to appetite and, they're getting regular intake in, they're likely going to be in a state that allows them to facilitate either growing of the muscle, improving of performance, or what have you. The avenues for on the mountain versus training would look a little bit different, but let's say that it's focused on training. Mm-hmm. And let's say that he's saying, look, I'm doing Mountain Tough, so I know the training protocol is right. If you're winging it, it's sometimes I'll be with someone and say, look, the nutrition's fine, your program sucks. Yeah. There's nothing in here written that allows you to really progress. You're stuck. You need to go to the drawing board with the training, not really the nutrition. That looks good.
For sure.
But then other times you'll get guys who say, look, I'm following this program, where you can look at that and say, okay, those guys are well educated. They write great programming. That's not it. I can take that off the table. When you look at it, and this will be somewhat controversial, but again, this is what I see.
Yeah.
Almost always, especially if you get guys trying to do, or gals, trying to do a program that involves higher intensity workouts, higher intensity pursuits, like climbing 3,000 vertical feet to get to a sheep or whatever, almost always they're trying to operate on a high protein, high fat, low carb diet. And if you'll get some people that'll say, that's what works the best for me, then that's what you should do. But by and large majority of the population, the higher the intensity of the workout, the more the pendulum shifts towards burning carbohydrate. And we know the muscle contracts almost 3 times faster than it does fueled by fat with carbohydrate. Mm-hmm. So on those more intense workouts, you get them to shift some of that. You could have them focused on specific grams. You could just simply say, look, at each meal, make a little bit of your plate, allocate a larger portion of your plate than you currently are towards carbs. Bring down the protein a little bit, because that's the other deal, right? Like, so let's paint this scenario and say this guy's getting tons of protein, good amount of fat, very little in carbohydrate, starts taking on some high intensity interval type training, or they're doing a lot of rucks where they're making big pushes. That protein, through a process in the body, can convert to give you energy. It's no longer going to the muscle. It's now becoming energy to do that pursuit because the intensity is so high. So you can't outsmart the body. In my mind, it would be better to design a plan that has the fuel that it needs, bring down the protein some, make room for the fuel, and then give that person the opportunity to really execute the workout and the programming. When you make those shifts, almost always you find that issue alleviated. They can start training. Their times do get better because, again, would you survive going higher protein, high fat? You would survive, but most people, like that performance athlete, aren't concerned about surviving. They want to absolutely excel. They want to perform. So either personal expectations of themselves or they're on a team or what have you, but they don't want to just make it. They want to do the best that they can.
Yeah, and so it could be a major issue with that individual if they don't have enough gas in the tank, and that gas in the tank for those physical tests is going to come from carbohydrates.
Exactly. So like, let's take yesterday, for example. I loved doing a workout with you guys. I think that was fun. It was super fun.
That was tough.
It was tough.
It was tough.
It was high intensity. It was there was a lot of movement in there. So what would those two scenarios look like? The workout, no matter what your nutrition looks like whether it's a well-written plan or not, is still going to be hard. It's not like you go from the workout being really challenging to basically like a walk in the park. There's no scenario where you get better in that. It still is going to be hard. But as you start to get deeper and deeper into that, right? Like for most of us, it was around 40 minutes or so. Almost anyone's going to be able to knock out the first 8 minutes at a fairly good pace. Mm-hmm. Keeping that pace though into minute 38, into minute 40, the guy that's been having good nutrition written out, he's getting some of his calories from carbs, that fuel tank during that high intensity activity, he's going to feel fairly strong still at 38 minutes, 40 minutes. His pace may slow down. Your muscles are still tired, but he's going to be having a much higher pace than if that same guy, let's say we repeated that workout today and the guy went more high fat, more high protein. You start to get into minute 38 and you're still doing it. You're still able to execute the workout, but your time's slow.
You're bonking.
Right. So you're not hitting a wall in the sense of you just stop, you're done. That's it. You just can't hardly get through each set. You can get through them, but you got to give yourself a little more time. The pace is a little bit slower. The execution's a little less perfect. And again, if some people like that, then they can do it.
And that feeling at that moment, is it your body running out of glucose to burn for that workout?
Yes. And more specifically, so we can store carbohydrate in the muscle and in the liver, but those stores are limited. And that's, to the point of to the credit of the advocates that are, more high fat, more high protein. There are times where that's appropriate. Their position is, well, I never run out of fuel. I've got a lot of fat reserves. But the ability to perform at a high level, generally speaking, is going to be better with carbohydrate to that point, because those reserves, when filled, will break down and supply energy to that muscle. Muscle glycogen, which is the stored form of carbohydrate, is unique in the sense of it's just powering that muscle, right? It's just giving you the fuel to the quads or to the shoulders or to the whatever.
Gotcha.
And so like thinking about extending this into the mountain, if you tap out of that reserve in the first hour or two because you've invested that entire time climbing, you haven't taken any time to refuel yourself, you'll start to notice after 2 to 3 hours or more of climbing, your pace slows a lot. And people, will chalk it up to altitude, chalk it up to training. And sometimes those things are true too. But a lot of times you can eliminate that by simply having some fuel. And that doesn't mean you've got to sit down, stop climbing, get out your jet boil, start making something. Just have some electrolyte powder in your bladder or an Analgene where you can stop and you can take a sip, stop and top off the reserve. And that's the name of the game. By stopping periodically when you're on the mountain, you're keeping those reserves topped off. You're not exhausting them. And that's one of the main keys to fuel on the mountain is you're never left playing catch up, right? And most, I get it. I totally understand it. You want to get to the knob. You want to get to the knob and start glassing. You're already behind. It's daylight almost, or you saw a sheep. You want to get there. You don't want to take the time to deal with fueling up. But you probably are going to take more time when you get to the top. You're smoked. You have to stop. So now it's a case of like, well, now we've got to stop. I've got to sit down, eat something, give myself the opportunity to catch up, rest for a while, and then try to go again. And it'd be so much fast. Like one of the phrases I love is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Just stopping, sipping periodically, going up there, popping some gummy bears, popping whatever it is that you like while you're climbing just put you in so much of a better position than just trying to make the push without stopping.
Yeah, and I noticed you do that yesterday in the workout, just with, you had like jelly beans yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So, and I definitely felt low on gas in yesterday's workout. I just came off like a week family reunion trip where we were outside of home and doing like a lot of surfing. We were on the boat all day long. So I definitely walked into yesterday feeling like my tank was empty right away.
Yeah.
And if I would have like eaten glucose before that workout, can you feel that tank rise pretty quickly? Is it that fast acting?
Well, it didn't show that you had no gas. And you don't, I would say this, you don't feel it in the way that you feel like, let me think of an analogy or metaphor you could use. Let me think about one. You don't physically feel it necessarily. There's not like this jolt of caffeine that hits you, right? Where you're like, oh man, I'm ready to roll. Yeah. There's nothing like that. You can, and this is great advice. The only thing you can ever compare yourself is you. There were, how many of us working out? 6?
Yep.
So I couldn't compare myself to Nate or to you or to Eric or to anyone else. I really had to compare myself to me. How are you doing? Are you pushing yourself? Are you cheating those burpees, right? Yeah. Are you doing those things?
Yeah.
So you could only really compare yourself to 2 scenarios. If you could go back and repeat that exact same scenario today without any, or with adequate fuel, let's say that fuel. You did take a different fuel, you would notice a difference in the outcome of how you felt. You can only really compare them to 2 different scenarios. So you don't feel it in the sense of when you drink coffee, you become more alert or more awake. But you do notice the difference if you move from not training with enough fuel to training with enough fuel. One thing that I'll throw in here, one of the topics that we covered in the new nutrition course for Mountain Tough was timing. This idea of timing around workouts, etc. And there's a huge, over the recent years, there's been a lot of talk or whatever about not eating after 6 p.m., not eating after 7 p.m., not eating after these late times, because as you're slowing down, your metabolism slows down, and that takes any fuel that you've consumed and turns it into body fat. That's complete garbage, not true. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you're an early guy, if you're an early morning exerciser, guy or gal, and you don't have time to eat before that workout, the best thing you could do is eat a carbohydrate-rich diet or carbohydrate-rich meal as your last meal of the day, no matter what time that is, because that's going to refuel those reserves. And as long as that workout the next morning's not exceeding 60 minutes, 90 minutes, depending on the intensity of the workout, those reserves are going to be more than enough to supply the fuel needed for that workout, right? If it extends beyond that, like let's say you're doing some endurance training and you're at 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, now fueling during intra-workout carbohydrates, what we call it. So giving yourself carbohydrate during the workout to top those stores becomes a little more relevant. But yeah, if you're an early morning person that likes to train early morning and you don't have time to eat, or you don't have the stomach to eat, like you don't want to eat something and then go work out on a full stomach, one of the ways to mitigate that is have a pretty carb-rich evening meal.
Get it the night before.
To make sure that you've got those glycogen stores full and ready to go for the morning.
That is super interesting. And so the gummy bear jelly bean hack, I've definitely known for a while in terms of just my wife and I's background was in the running and ultra running community. And it is interesting because for a long time now in that community, the like goo shots have been so common and so prevalent, and all marathoners know that those shots of glucose throughout those long runs is going to really help them feel better, keep their energy levels up, even their mental clarity and their performance all around. And when we were really into marathon running, like my wife knew the exact timing she was going to take her goose shots on a race, and I knew my exact timing I was going to take them. And so she would end up taking more than I would. and I would take less, but I knew like exactly every 7 miles I was going to take one. And so in a marathon, I would have 3 goose shots in my pocket every single race, and I'd do one at 7, 14, and 21. And you would, like you said, it's not like a shot of coffee, but you just could feel that your body was running at a much better performance level, like a motorcycle or car that's like had a tune-up, like everything's running properly. Your mental clarity is really good. And I remember so many different races where you forget them, or you didn't bring enough, or like your pre-race plan wasn't proper, and you just feel that like crash and burn. And then it is a real like miserable finish. You're still able to finish, but it's a miserable experience.
Yeah, you can suffer through anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But part of what you're saying, and I guess you could say that you feel it in this sense, was you have stored carbohydrate both in the liver and the muscle. The liver is an interesting topic because it can be converted to blood glucose, a fuel source for the brain. So you talk about mental clarity whenever you're doing some of these endurance runs. The impetus for trying to take in carbs during the workout is you're keeping those full, so you're not expending them. You expend them, you're in a trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the type of deal where you got to stop and refuel and all of that. But when you're topping those off, you're giving your liver the opportunity to give you some glucose, which goes to the brain. You can keep better mental clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting that you have experience there. And you're right. Like the marathon community has been doing stuff like this for a while. You'll have people who will say stuff like, I don't like the goos. Either A, the gel packets are too sweet for me and I don't like the taste of them. I'm going to come back to that one. Or 2, they really upset my stomach. One of the reasons I love gummy bears and jelly beans and things like that is you can control the dose.
Mm-hmm.
You open a goo pack, like that whole thing's going down, or you're going to have a mess on your hand
right away. Yeah.
And so the gut can take in about 60 grams of carbohydrate. And one of the main reasons marathoners, guys on the mountain, experience such issue with those is that's a lot of carbs to dump in at once. With gummy bears and with jelly beans, you control the dose. You can do 5 and then 10 minutes later do another 5, and then at 20 minutes later do another 5. You control how much you're putting in. If you find things like that way too sweet for you, the old trick, and this is going to sound crazy, but baggied mashed potatoes. So you get something that's more on the salty front.
Yep.
You get something that's savory versus sweet, and you get something that's going to digest rather quick. So one of the other deals when it comes to the mountain nutrition is you really don't want something during high intensity effort that's got a lot of fat, fiber, or protein, because those things slow digestion in the gut. They literally slow the release of food down your digestive tract. So you've got basically this collection of worst case scenarios happening when that your output is high, so a lot of blood is moving from your digestion system into the legs. You've got a pack on, so you're removing circulation to the gut even more. You're adding fiber in, which slows digestion in the gut. You're adding protein in, slows digestion in the gut. You're adding fat in. So it's like you're doing everything that's going to make this really hard for you to digest. So you eat it, and 20 minutes later, you're blowing your buddy behind you out of the water from the fiber and all of the digestion issues.
Yep.
Your stomach's in pain. So it's unconventional wisdom. And in the world where like we're hyper-focused on inflammatory this and insulin that and all of these other things, we're trying to take in things on the mountain that don't sit well with us, and it's contradictory, but you want things that are easy to digest. And the reason there's less concern for those things, even though I think that those words are far too dramatized, we don't care about that as much, is because the active muscle is raging through those calories in a different way than if you and I were sitting here all day long at this table and we were pounding gummy bears under the idea of it was fuel. Like, that's a lie.
Yeah.
yeah. We're fooling ourselves if we said that. But You are in a different situation when you're on the mountain compared to when you're in an office chair. So on no planet would I tell a person, hey, yeah, you want a weight loss plan? Go eat gummy bears. And, our program has over the years kind of been known as the gummy bear guy, which wasn't intentional, but it's been fun.
Yeah.
But I had to come back, talk about when we first started chatting, what's changed in the world of nutrition over the years. I've had to clarify that. It's like, look,
that's for on the mountain.
Yeah, let's clarify something. I'm not saying eat to your heart's content, whatever you want, and you'll magically start hitting these program goals you've set for yourself. This is a different deal when you're training for something or when you're on the mountain or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because on the mountain performance, shifting gears there now is a completely different beast, correct? Because I might be burning 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day in town, and then I go on a hunt, and now maybe for 7 days I'm going to burn 8,000 calories a day, just because of the demands and moving all day long under heavy load. So the nutrition has to be handled completely separately.
It's totally different, and in some ways, that pyramid that we talked about, for the training side of things that we spent most of our time focusing on for the app, is a bit inverted in the sense of one of the main things that you do, or that I do when I sit down and write a program for someone, is I'm trying to make sure that they're getting the right types of fuel in regular intervals more than I am trying to make sure they get enough calories. And that is a complete contradiction to what you read about in the backpacking world. Everyone wants to focus on calories per ounce. And I understand, look, this is the type of stuff we enjoy doing too. I don't want to volunteer to carry a bunch of weight, but I also want to feel good.
Yeah.
So I get wanting to have the lightest pack possible and get the most bang for your buck and a calories per ounce. But in some senses, the amount of calories that you bring is somewhat irrelevant to the fact of them being the right type of calories based on the hunt that you're on. So if it's an intense hunt, or you're chasing elk all over the place in September, or you're going to Alaska, you're doing a sheep hunt, you've got a goat hunt, you're climbing a lot, that's on the intense level. But if you take October mule deer or a late season hunt, you're trying to get to a knob and just find something to go after. You're spending a large majority of the day sitting down, glassing, you're not moving as much.
Moving slow.
Yeah, you're not going to necessarily need to worry about the timing of your nutrients on that, or getting lots of carbohydrate in. That's a different scenario. So it's still going to be built around the goal, just like the programming side of things for your training. But as the intensity increases, you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to getting the right types of fuel at the right timing over the course of really that hunt, right? And so making sure that those things are in place for that person. And even thinking about your comment earlier with me yesterday in the workout doing the jelly beans, there's a lot of preference. I like those. Some guys were drinking something, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the what you use to transport the nutrients, right? Your source du jour does not matter near as much as are you meeting the number.
It can be personal preference.
Yeah, it can be personal preference. So sometimes it's jelly beans, sometimes it's gummy bears, sometimes it's a drink, sometimes it's, what have you. And if you start getting into high altitude stuff, right, and your appetite's just in the gutter, you have nothing at all, taking things like something you can drink, even sticks of honey, things like hard candies that you can suck on, can still provide you some fuel if you can't get in whole meals. Carbohydrate digestion is unique in the sense that it starts in the mouth. So if you can suck on something, you can get good fuel in still. There's even research to suggest that taking in an electrolyte drink, swishing and spitting has better performance outcomes than someone drinking water alone.
That's insane.
So there's always workaround. There's always this spectrum of practical and optimal, right, that you're trying to balance for people. And there's always workarounds. And we often get people, all of us, me included, in my own niche of hobbies and interests, get spun up in perfection, right? And sometimes even if something can't look perfect, there's somewhere in the middle. It's this will still do. So you either have two options: come off the mountain, or go to the gym. And if you can get the right balance, you're going to get the results. And so or try this and see if it helps. So in the case where you're at a high altitude, you've got all of these issues, but you've got some hard candies, you've got some electrolyte powder, you've got some honey packets you've stolen from your local restaurant or Amazon.
Yeah.
The name is escaping me, but there's some little packs on Amazon that are great that I'll buy and just keep in there. But there's always workarounds for issues that pop up either in the field or while you're training.
So, like, if I want to feel good on a typical hunt, my theory right now, and I could be off on this, but my theory right now is a lot of our hunts that we're doing in the Montana backcountry, I would jot down as like most of the day is probably zone 2. And so we're like moving through the backcountry at a lower heart rate, and it's pretty rare that we're like spiking into that high intensity zone. But you're moving all day for very long days and maybe spiking it a few times if you have to like push real fast to a ridge, but that is rare, just like in that shot scenario. So if you have like 5 or 6 days at zone 2 and you are moving all day, so you're burning a lot of calories, then what would be just some general recommendations to feel good on a hunt like that?
I would say still eating with some regularity. You'll have more flexibility on what you bring. So if you wanted to bring more things like salami and jerky and, hard cheeses and almonds, nuts, and those type of things, you could. One thing that is good to note is because you're at zone 2, you're not torching through those carbohydrate reserves as quick.
Yep.
So you may not need to bring as many things high in carbs, which means you can save weight based on what you need your nutrition plan to be written by. I would say too, though, don't underestimate or downplay the role of preference plays, right? You could bring the most ideal macro spreadsheet, gorgeous plan on the face of the planet, and all of it sound disgusting to you by day 3, especially when it's September, Labor Day, and it's just smoking hot outside and you've been moving.
Yeah.
So yes, it's good to know numbers. Yes, it's good to engineer those numbers around kind of what the anticipated effort is, but don't underestimate the value of adherence in terms of liking what you bring, because none of it's going to matter if you can't force yourself to eat it. But to your point, and the scenario that you painted, you do have more flexibility, and because you are in zone 2, you're not torching through those carbohydrates as much. You are preserving the muscle stores more than you would be if you were just trying to blaze trail up something, and it gives you a lot more flexibility.
And then probably the major thing I would just need to watch in that scenario is just not creating a huge calorie deficit.
You could. So the worst outcome, I roll my eyes a little bit just because there's a number of rabbit trails you could go down. Like one of the phrases that we say in nutrition is the best answer is the most annoying, and that is it depends, because it's always going to be scenario based. But you can stay on top of calories. The worst case scenario, if you're in a deficit, is you're going to see your weight drop. If you have insufficient calories, but you have, even in the zone 2 type of a deal, you have enough carbohydrate on board, because if gone long enough, you will exhaust those too. Even if you go long enough without refueling, even at zone 2, you'll exhaust the carb store. So if you do come up in a situation where you do need to make, a pretty hard effort, you'll feel like we talked about that person feeling in the workout.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, like let's say it's a 7 to 10 day hunt. You don't want to fall too behind, because that will start to catch up with you, right? Anyone can stop by, a mountain town gas station and pick up random foods and be okay for the day. When you start looking at 7 and what seems to be the most often 10-day hunts, like for people that are traveling, the day-to-day effort and staying on top of that, getting enough calories, making sure there's sufficient amounts of carbohydrates to fill those energy reserves, no matter what zone you find yourself in, enough protein, not excess, to recover the muscle. You're not trying to grow the muscle, so you don't need 600 grams of protein per day. You're trying to recover it for the next day.
Yeah.
And then ensuring that, yes, there's enough calories there to make sure you're not losing too much weight while you're out there either.
Got it. That's super helpful. I wanted to go back to non-mountain performance for a little bit and just chat about what are you seeing alcohol do to clients? What is your thought on alcohol as it pertains to nutrition, weight loss, performance nutrition?
Yeah, so it's like all things, the dose makes the poison. The guy that's having, or the guy or the gal who's having a drink on the weekends, probably not suffering any consequence. The more frequent that shows up in someone's logs, then obviously there's a huge hindrance to them meeting their progress. There's a few ways that this is the case. Number one, when you're drinking alcohol, alcohol is the only place we get calories that provides no performance advantage at all. We could make the argument that if you and I sat here all day and completely gorged ourselves on gummy bears, though less than ideal, if we go work out tomorrow, that's going to be a real good workout, right? So there's some performance advantage, even though, yes, I admit less than an ideal approach. With alcohol, it's just alcohol. You're getting, so we have, with carbohydrates and proteins, there's 4 calories per unit of each of those. And the unit we use is called grams. Fat, there's 9. Alcohol, there's 7. So the more intake you take of alcohol, basically what you would say in a general sense, the more you're taking in something that's giving you nothing more than just a bunch of calories. So you can see how even if there was no decline in performance, that's just going to really put a barricade between you and what your actual goal is. On the performance side of things, when a person does exceed what we've kind of called out to be the quote recommended dose, and I'll try to come back to that, remind me if I don't. You see 2 things. One, you see the inability for the muscle to recover and grow. There's a physical hindrance there because of the nature of alcohol and its interferences with absorption of other things. The second thing that you see is when you eat food, we don't feel this or see this, but there's a process that takes the consumption of that food, it being something on your plate that you love, and puts it into fuel that you can go use, or for the protein to recover the muscle. There's a process that happens there. That process is largely driven by, let's call them helper nutrients, right? So vitamins and minerals. When you have a high intake of alcohol, that alcohol intake interferes with that process. So you're not converting things as quick to energy, right? And so you've got a performance decline there. So the biggest role is obviously the calorie intake and the barricade involved with that. And then you've got the 2 ends of the performance in the sense of there's a significant, like the term you're probably most familiar with is muscle protein synthesis. There's a significance barrier to that. And then you're also not converting energy, food into energy as well. One of the coolest but most unexpected outcomes I've seen in our program is like people start changing their habits, and you'll get things like, I started doing the dishes and my wife loves that. It almost kind of makes me emotional because it changes their life. I play with my kids, like, because I recognize, like, I want to be a better dad, and I quit drinking. I've had it makes me kind of emotional because it changes their life.
For sure.
I've had wives message me thanking me because their husbands quit drinking.
They're like a new man.
And started spending time with their family. And, I love my family, so I know what that means.
Yeah.
And I could care less about the calories at that. Like, if you gain all that weight back, but you stopped that and you became a better husband and better dad.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah, case closed.
Yeah.
So, yes, it affects performance, and that's what most people want. And, yes, it affects your calories, but being in a program, like, it's not about a program. It's like, it's my story, man. You start putting a focus on something, and it changes everything. Mm-hmm. And to me, like, that's the greater impact than just being enrolled in the program.
Yeah, creating better humans.
Yeah.
So very similar to someone going through a Mountain Tough program. For years, Mountain Tough has talked to our community about like the mental almost trumps the physical. So when someone is doing a Mountain Tough training program, we're doing everything possible to also help them become a more mentally tough individual. And even in recent years, just doing mindset curriculum. And I know mindset plays a huge role into someone's consistency and success on a nutrition program. What are you seeing from your perspective on how mindset can play a role in the success of them changing their lifestyle through nutrition?
Yeah, my my title or credentials or whatever you want to call it is dietitian, but I'm probably a psychologist more than a dietitian. It is everything. Like I'll tell people the hardest, the most challenging stretch that you're going to have is not the last 5 or 10 pounds. It's the 5 inches between your ears, or the 4 inches between. It's your mind. I mean, there's going to be it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting in the beginning. And at week 8 or so, you usually hit what I call the oatmeal stage, which is like, oatmeal's not bad, but it's not great. It's just oatmeal, right? It is what it is. The excitement, the newness is gone. You're pretty accustomed to seeing results at this point. And at that point, it becomes more about not going through the motions, but just continuing the consistency. And one of the things that like we'll often remind people of is in the beginning, what a program's designed to do is it's designed to give you some structure, right? Like some guidance, some guardrails, but and to be motivating. But at some point, you are going to have to figure out how to turn motivation into this is just me, right? Like there are going to be days you wake up and you don't want to go do what you need to go do. But because you've allowed yourself to develop habits, you go execute it no matter how you feel, right? And there has to be a point where, you move from being motivated to now it's just subconscious thought. It's not even a negotiation. I've had clients say, like, was there ever a point where you went back to your old habits? And, fortunately, I'll say, no, I didn't. Like, I never reverted once I committed. And that's not an accolade to me, but I developed a simple mantra early on, and that was, it doesn't matter. Like, I will wake up. I don't want to work out. It doesn't matter. I don't want to eat that. I'd rather have that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how you feel.
It doesn't matter how I feel. And you have to sort of move to this point of where there is no negotiation, right? You don't wake up and start plotting out about, well, if I skip today, I could probably go Thursday, and then maybe I can do the Friday workout too, because Thursday's going to come and you're not going to want to do it. Friday's going to come and you're not going to want to do it. There's not even a negotiation of, do you want to do it today or don't you? You get up and you go do it.
That's one of the best, like, and well-researched, like, mental toughness hacks is the whole theory that us as humans are terrible at negotiating with ourselves. Yeah. So anytime we give ourself a chance to negotiate with ourself, like 9 out of 10 times we're going to lose. Yeah. So it's like laying in bed in the morning thinking about, do I need to go to the gym and do this workout? As soon as you have that thought, you started a negotiation with yourself.
Yeah.
The most successful people generally are the ones that just make that not a negotiation. And it's just a really kind of pretty simple paradigm shift between, like, I'm not going to think about if I'm going to the gym. I'm going to the gym removes that negotiation out of their mind. And it's like pretty phenomenal how powerful that tip is.
Yeah. And when you do that, I will say this, there's been many times I've just shown up It wasn't pretty. It wasn't great. It wasn't like it changed the world and I set PRs. It was literally, I showed up. And for me, it became a lot more about, I just don't want to lose the rhythm of being in the habit, right? More so than, oh, I'm going to execute perfection. I didn't care about perfection. I wanted progress. And I knew that if I allowed myself, I had a really good track record of allowing myself to quit and do whatever I wanted. And so in my mind, I lost that permission to negotiate with myself. If I woke up and didn't feel like it was still going to happen no matter what the outcome looked like. If it was, beautiful and great and setting PRs or not, I was still going to wake up and at least continue the habit, because for me, it was as much about staying in the rhythm as it was, doing the thing. And that helped. And I think that, like, when you talk to people about that, it helps them too, because the idea is, it's like, we live in like a very polarizing society. Everything's all good or all bad. And if I can't do it all good, I'm not doing it at all. It's like, if you would execute half perfect with consistency, it would be way better than randomly, executing perfect. Like, consistency, no matter if it's, at least in my experience, you can confirm it with training and definitely with nutrition, that is the thing. You would be better off being consistently 80% perfect than randomly being 100% perfect.
It's so powerful. I mean, it's like the James Clear atomic habits.
Yeah.
It's like we are the accumulation of our daily habits. And so if you're not consistent at your nutrition or your fitness or shooting your bow or working on your marriage or any of that, like, the consistency is what makes us who we are.
100%. And speaking of James Clear, one of the things he says in there is, like, the successful person, they identify as that, right? I'm not going to work out. I'm an active person. And so because that's me, maybe I'm not going to be able to squeeze in a full hour because I got home late and I need to put the kids in bed and there's not much daylight left and my headlamp is out of batteries. But you got 30 minutes, right? Or you got 20 minutes. Well, then do 50% of what you had planned rather than saying, I'm not going to mess with it.
Yeah. Tying your change you want in your life to your identity is really powerful.
Yeah.
That concept is like one of the most powerful concepts for life change out there. Like, the study is from like the 70s and 80s, when there was still a lot of Americans smoking. And so they had a huge population try to quit smoking, and they would do okay. And then they'd go to like a party and get offered a cigarette when they were drinking, and they would accept, and then they'd be right back to being a smoker again. And so the research study just had half of the group say, I am not a smoker, when they're offered a cigarette. So they changed their identity from being a smoker that was trying to quit to just a non-smoker. And the non-smokers, it like outperformed the other group by like 70 to 90%, something just staggering, all just by tying it to the identity is really interesting.
That's so good. I love basic application of something, right? I've been there, but I would imagine that a vast majority of people have a hard time identifying themselves as having that type of makeup, right? Of being mentally strong and what all that means, because we have standards that are extremely high in that space, right? You take guys like David Goggins and Cam Hanes, who are, just encouraging and motivating a lot of people in the same type of identity. And that is the upper level, but there are ranges, right? I am not at that level, but for what I need to be every day, which is a family guy, able to be active, able to do what he loves, get nutrition right 90% of the time. Granted, it's my job. Like, that to me is the key part. And I will say this, I don't mean this in an arrogant sense at all, but I'm a great example of this in the sense of, I wasn't born with the stuff. I wasn't born with the juice that it takes to be that guy. I simply knew what I needed to do each day, which was started honestly with just waking up at a decent time, planning out my nutrition. That moved into being active, and then doing it day in and day out. And so in the beginning, it does become discipline. But that discipline then moves into subconscious habit. And before you know it, you just are that person, right? But I would say that anybody that listens to this and says like, man, I just don't feel like that guy, you can learn it, you can be it, right? And it's probably the path there is a lot simpler than you think, and will probably take less time than you think. But it will take consistency, and it will be some time in the river of misery, like we talked about earlier, to wade through. But if you wade through it, the other side's a lot better, a lot better.
And it's like choosing your river of misery. Do you want
the
misery of unhealth, or do you want the misery of short-term suffering?
It's a great point too. I mean, obviously we're talking about training and performance, but training and performance, yes, of course, it bleeds over into the mountains and you being able to do stuff that you love. But working a long day and having energy for my kids and being able to work a long day and doing day-to-day stuff, like it bleeds over into that. And that can sometimes be, the juice makes the squeeze worth it in that, as much as the, 10, 15, 14, however many days a year a guy spends out in the mountains, worth it. The daily piece of being more able, and able as a blank, able to insert the blank, right?
Yeah.
Is so much more worth it than anything else, really, that I've found.
I totally agree. We have so many Mountain Toughers that buy Mountain Tough, are subscribed to the app for the very first time because they're planning a Western hunt. And so they will be hunting in Colorado next year, and they know they need to be more physically prepared, and they will sign up for the app. And we get so excited because we know as a company that their whole life's about to change.
Yeah.
And they at home for those first couple weeks, they're excited because they're training for a hunt, but we know that hunting is just a tiny little aspect of what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Like they're going to feel better, move better, be better all around. And it's going to change how they feel the whole 365 days leading up to that hunt, and then probably change their life for decades to come. And so it's that grander perspective that it's about a lot of days where you can feel a lot better, plus the mindset and how you interact with your family and community. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, and I mean, again, going back to, if you don't have the app, you should get it for the new nutrition section, because one of the things that we finish with is like, well, what's your best tip for people who, get to a phase where they want to maintain? Maintenance is a little bit of a misnomer in the sense of it eludes this idea of you go back to your old life. You really don't. It changes, though. It gets easier, right? And those disciplines become subconscious habits. That's the hope. One of the best things you could do is when you get done with that, you get back from that Western hunt, for the guy who basically signs up and whatever, is sign up for something else.
Yeah.
Don't let yourself have idle hands where you're just kind of out there with ambiguity and you're just like, well, I guess don't sign up for something else, or train for something else, or, put something else out there that gives you a focus beyond, I'm going to the gym to burn calories and create a deficit. You will lose that game eventually. But when there's something on the calendar that you're training for, it's a different ball game altogether in terms of both motivation and results. And so, I think whether training or nutrition, once you finish or once you hit the culmination of whatever, you're not done. Now it changes, right? Find something else to go sign up for, because it will keep you motivated.
It's huge. Yeah. Just continue to sign up for hard things that'll challenge you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm stoked, man. I'm stoked that you're here in the lab. It's been awesome to have you here the last couple of days, and we're really thrilled to get this product out in the app to the community. I think it's going to be a huge game changer. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. Honestly, I was quite humbled by the invitation. And, when you work in, this is a phrase that's often thrown around, but like the outdoor space, you see personalities, right? And you're kind of like, man, I wonder if that guy or that gal is like that in real life. You guys are the real deal, man. You guys have been so hospitable, so kind, so gracious. The whole team, like the workout yesterday was, it was hard, but it was great. It was fun. You know, you got guys that are suffering and encouraging other guys, and just a spectacular time. So, you know, I guess A, thank you. And B, for if people have wondered, like, what are these guys like behind the scenes? It's the real deal, and I truly mean that. So it's been a pleasure and an honor, and I can't thank you enough for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, and likewise to you. The content that you've put out for years is impressive. I mean, the free articles and the insights and the education that you've been giving out for free to the hunting community is powerful stuff. And it's cool because all of that stuff, like we talked about yesterday, it's like planting those seeds and changing people's lives. And you've done a great job of that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
And Kyle, how can people find you and reach out to you when they need to?
Yeah, so our business or program or whatever you want to call it is Valley to Peak Nutrition, and Googling that will probably get you anything you want, from our website to all of the free resources to some of the low cost resources to coaching to the Instagram. We do a Friday FAQ every Friday. So if you've got questions, you can jump in there, and, you know, I'll be as specific as possible. But yeah, everything's under Valley to Peak Nutrition. We have a podcast that we do. We'll have to get you guys on that. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to help if anybody's got questions.
Awesome. Thanks. We better get you to the airport.
Yeah, I better roll.
Thanks, Kyle.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, that was awesome.